Hey y'all, Dave Isaacs back with you for jamplay.com. And in this lesson, we're going to take a look at how we can pull chord tones from the major and minor pentatonic scales. So this is a little bit of a theory lesson, and I know for some of you, you hear music theory and your eyes start to glaze over. I love when people say, yeah, I want to learn how to play lead, but I don't need to learn any theory. I don't want to know about that. And my reaction to that is, well, okay, good luck. And it's not so much that you have to go deep down the rabbit hole of the formulas and memorizing all that information that's so daunting when you first start trying to learn this stuff. I'm not going to say that it doesn't have value. It has a lot of value. And ultimately, when you absorb theory in bits and pieces, you might find that there's a lot that doesn't make sense until you've absorbed enough bits and pieces that you start to see the bigger picture, and that's where the real utility begins to come in. But in the short term, all you really need to be thinking about is layout on the fingerboard. So if you have in your head, there is a minor pentatonic scale and the fingering goes like this. There's a major pentatonic scale and the fingering goes like that. And here is how they overlap and relate to each other, which is what I'm going to get into in this next lesson. Those little bits and pieces of information are immediately applicable if you can just connect a fingering pattern to a type of sound. If you can start off by just making a connection between a fingering pattern and a particular type of sound, then that gives you the starting point that you need. You may not be thinking all that specifically about scale degrees, what tones of the scale you're actually working with, until you really are comfortable enough that you can sort of change channels in your brain from visualizing this pattern versus that pattern. But you do begin to see the relationships in the overlay. So hopefully this lesson will begin to illustrate some of that. So what I want to do first is just to review real quick. Open position fingering for an E minor pentatonic. 0, 3, 0, 2, 0, 2, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 3, and back to my open. And here is E major pentatonic. 0, 4, 2, 4, 2, 4, 1, 0, 2, 0, and we can keep going 2 and 4. Let's take a look at this for a second. First octave of the minor pentatonic is if we were to break this down according to scale degrees, in other words, the position each note occupies in the scale sequence, we have a root, a minor third, which you could think of as a bluesy note because it is, followed by a fourth and a fifth, and a minor seventh, also a bluesy note. Not technically a blue note, that's something else, we'll deal with that. But it's a minor note as opposed to a major note. So minor pentatonic, minor note here, minor note here. Keep this third fret E in G rather in mind. This is important because in the major pentatonic, we're going to do this. Most importantly, be aware of the difference between using this note, the minor third, and this note, the major third. So minor, major. There are other differences, but I'm really focusing in on this minor versus this major. And the same thing happens in the upper octave, minor, there's your minor third, and your minor seventh. Major, there's your major third, so minor third, major third. The minor pentatonic is using this minor seventh. The major pentatonic is using this major six. So if you can think of these two places where you have notes side by side, one pointing you to minor, one pointing you to major. Here, and here, for the minor third and major third. And then here minor 7th, which can also be played here. We've established that on the 5th fret of the A string. That's in the minor pentatonic, so I could do this too. But the major pentatonic is going to substitute a fret below, major 6. Now, can we combine them? Yes, we can, and we're going to get into that in just a moment. Again, on this side, minor 7, fret below, major 6. The main idea you're keeping in mind is that if you're using this scale, you're using these notes. If you're using that scale, you're using those notes, but they're side by side and interconnected in the sense that there are notes, for example, the root, the 5th, that are in both the major and the minor. Need to take this a step further. I said that we're talking about chord tones, so let's talk about a chord. We're going to look at an E7 chord. A 7th chord made up of 4 notes. We don't always have to play all 4. Again, I'm not asking you to memorize formulas, just to understand that a 7th chord is a major chord with an added minor 7th. It's a dissonant note, but it creates flavor. So you might know E7 like this, with the open D string. You might know it like this with the addition of the pinky on the 2nd string, 3rd fret. You might know it like this, where I'm actually muffling the D string, not hitting a note on that string at all. All the same type of sound, the same quality. They're sonically and texturally a little bit different, but they're all E7 chords. So what we're going to do here is outline the notes of the E7 arpeggio, meaning we're playing the notes of the chord in sequence like a scale, except that we're skipping scale tones. Open E, 4th fret G sharp, 2nd fret B, open D, 2nd fret E, and the 2nd octave, 1st fret G sharp, open B, fretted D, and open E. So, E, 4th fret G sharp, 2nd fret B, open D, E 2nd fret, G sharp 1st fret, open B, 3rd fret D, open E, and we could keep going to this high G sharp at the 4th fret. You might notice that this arpeggio is already combining notes from the major pentatonic and the minor. We have the major 3rd. The 5th of the chord is in both. The minor 7th comes from the minor pentatonic. Major 3rd, minor 7th. This is part of the tension that creates a bluesy sound, or what we call a bluesy sound. Major elements and minor elements combined. And anytime you're playing a 7th chord, and I don't mean any of the many varieties of 7th, major 7th, minor 7th, but a E7, A7, B flat 7, whatever that is, you have that major sound with the major 3rd and the minor sound of the minor 7th. Now, I'm going to play sort of somewhere between a scale and an arpeggio that's going to incorporate more of the notes of the minor pentatonic along with the major. For example, I can use both the minor 3rd and the major 3rd. Very common sound, really. Straight out of the major pentatonic, but add the minor 7th. Minor 3rd, major 3rd, 5th, 6th, minor 7th. So listen to it as a scale. So we're still skipping some notes, so it's kind of somewhere between a scale and an arpeggio. But just knowing that it really is simply an E7 arpeggio with an added minor 3rd for flavor. So in other words, instead of this, it's, and instead of this, An A7 chord, you might know like this, or like this, or like this. Again, sonically and texturally different, but the same chord, same quality. And I'm going to walk through this one starting from open A. 4th fret, 2nd fret, 2nd fret, 2nd fret, open, and 3rd fret. Major 3rd, 5th, minor 7th. Major 3rd, 5th, minor 7th. So the exercise for this lesson is going to combine the E7 and A7 arpeggios with minor notes from the minor pentatonic scale as well, and major notes from the major pentatonic scale. So let me walk you through this. This is going to be in an upper position, but in the last lesson we went through the different positions of the E minor pentatonic. You shouldn't have really any difficulty with this. And even if you're not, because already we've gone through a lot of information, so if you're not quite seeing where all these things are on the fingerboard, just learn the pattern, and as you continue to go over it, I think those relationships will become clearer. So I'm going to walk you through this lick by lick, starting with an E minor pentatonic lick. But it's going to resolve because our chord progression, our backing track, is just going back and forth between E7 and A7. So the licks will alternate between working over the E chord and working over the A chord. E minor pentatonic over the E7. But landing on this A, which is anticipating the chord change to the A, and then essentially the arpeggio with the added minor 3rd. And then doing more or less the same thing on E7, minor 3rd, major 3rd, borrowing the major 6 from the major pentatonic. And it's the minor 3rd, but it's also anticipating the change to A7. Here's the lick. Now that would actually work just fine over the E7 because E7 and all 7th chords do combine those minor and major sounds. So even though the E7 chord has a G sharp, if I play them like that, it really clashes a lot, but if I put it in context, sounds fine. Chord goes to A in the next lick, up to the high root, 7th. That C sharp is actually the 3rd of the A7 chord. E is also part of the chord, but is also sending us back to E. If I play this first line, listen for the way each lick implies the chord it's fitting. Continuing on with the same idea. E minor pentatonic again, once again anticipating the chord change, although the note would fit the E as well, still does. Here, A major arpeggio, starting on the 4th string, 7, 3rd string, 6, 2nd string, 5, and 2nd string, 8, 1st string, 5, 7, 6, 5, 8, 5, outlining A7, and so we just walk up. And even though this 8-5 on the 2nd string is part of that A7 arpeggio, it's also part of E minor pentatonic, sending us back to E7, minor 3rd, major 3rd, major pentatonic, minor pentatonic, setting up the A chord, a fifth, walking down in steps to the third of the chord. Back to this idea of visualization, if you have this shape in your head, then you'll see how that relates to this. Continuing on, E7, using more of the major pentatonic, different fingering, walking up to our minor third, then walking down inside the A7, and then just for fun, ending up with a bass string riff that's combining those major and minor thirds in a way that probably should sound familiar to you, reminiscent of lots of riffs that you've heard. Obviously, bass notes give you more of a sense of the chord, or a very strong sense of the chord. Here's a little chromatic walk up into a note that belongs to A7. Chromatic meaning one fret at a time. We'll be dealing with this in much greater detail down the road. Walking up back into E minor pentatonic. Notice how strong that major note is. Again, piece of that A. Try to get that under your fingers. See if you can play this along with me. If you can't keep up with the tempo, then just learn it lick by lick until you can. And keeping in mind, returning to all that theory that we started this lesson with, that if you can see the formations, if you can visualize where are the notes of the E chord, where are the notes of the A chord, and as you play the licks to try to recognize what belongs to what, the more you pay attention to this, the more you'll start to hear it, and the more you hear, the less you have to think about it. And this is really the process that leads to fluidity, to be able to just think of the sound and have it there. Because you know those fingerings after a while, they're in muscle memory. You associate that with the sonic quality, and then you just have the thought, major sound, minor sound, and your fingers know where to go. Here's the exercise. Try it along with me. Now, if you want to take this a step further, I can double time these licks, play them faster, and because that will go through the measure quicker, I'm going to leave space, but you'll see what I mean. couple of places where I expanded on that, added in some other notes. And you see how the same notes work because I fit with the same chord framework, just changed up the phrasing. This is really all we're ever doing. We're just mixing up how we use the notes, both in terms of the notes we choose and in terms of where we place them in time. So if you want to try learning those licks as I just played them, it's just twice as fast. If you're not up for handling that speed, don't worry about it. We're going to continue to build. And in the next couple of lessons, we're going to get into a blues chordal framework, have a couple of rhythm lessons to reinforce this idea of chord formations. And as we continue, hopefully you are seeing how everything builds upon everything else. So when you're ready, I'll see you there.